Dacha How, Wosha Michael Larson, Wosha Nieman Deponyu. Hello everybody, this is Mike Larson from BBC IML, and this is A Moment with Mike. So tonight I want to talk a little bit about, where I got my start in leadership. So I wasn't much of a reader when I was younger. When I was a kid, I really didn't enjoy reading that much. And I think mostly because what they gave you in school, to me, was kind of boring. They would ask me, they would give you books to read, and I would really hesitate to read them. They were so boring. And I would get through them. I'd do just enough to get by in a lot of those cases. But it wasn't until my mother went and got me a book by Jim Kelgard, and that changed things for me. It was a story about a kid with dogs out in the woods, and I always kind of thought it was a story about me. So it really resonated well with me. It hit home with me because it was out in the Northeast, and the first book was Big Red, and Big Red Irish setter that he had out in the woods with him and exploring the woods and all the challenges they had together, that they faced together. And it was a really good book. And that really got me started. I found out then that there was the possibility that there were books out there that I could actually enjoy reading and actually want to read. So that's where I got started reading. But I read a little bit from time to time. If I found a good fiction book, if a book had to really kind of hit me right away. It really had to grab my attention right away for me to continue to read it. If it moved along too slow, I just got bored with it and I just couldn't go, or if it wasn't an interesting subject. So it really had to be pretty interesting. Another book I remember was Perfect Storm. It was a great book, a great fiction book, but it was it really wasn't. It was a true story. They might have done a little bit of elaborating in it, but it was a really good book, and it talked about the weather, which I was interested in, and the ocean, and storms, and fishing, and all the things I enjoyed. And it was an excellent book, and then they made a movie out of it a few years ago. But I didn't really get my start in reading to educate myself. See, Jim Rohn had a great statement once. He said, to have a career, get an education. To create wealth, educate yourself. And I started reading my first book that was really about information, about learning how to be a better me, was by Bill O'Reilly. And it was about who's looking out for you. And it talked about friends. And you have acquaintances, and then you should have friends. Acquaintances are people that you connect with and you talk with frequently, but they really wouldn't, it's not the type of person you can maybe count on when the chips are down. But he talks about who can you count on. Surround yourself with people that you can definitely count on. And that was important to me at that time in my life, because I think I had a tough time defining who friends were. I had, in that time in my 30s, we had played a lot of softball. And I saw one of the guys that was running the softball as a friend, and I really didn't understand friends. And in the end, he really wasn't a friend. I think he hurt a lot of us more than he helped us, but that's another story. But I read that book, and that changed my idea about what friends would be. And that really got me started on informational books, as I call them. Then I read, not long after that, I read the book that really got me started in leadership, and that was John Maxwell, 21 Laws of Leadership. Very good book. This opened up my eyes to, I'd always been in sales. I always been working, and I did a little bit of management also when I had to, but I really didn't understand management that well. I would make friends with people, and I'd rely on my friendship with them to get them to do things with me, but I really didn't understand how to lead people. And that opened up my eyes to understanding that leadership is about serving others. And you have to understand that the person you are leading, you have to find out what they like in order to be able to lead them. And you have to lead by example. You have to have integrity. You have to have moral compass, and you have to really lead by example. And I understood leadership then, but I continued to struggle with it. You know, I wanted to be a leader. I wanted people to follow me, like you know, like we often see ourselves in that light. But if I think about what I really want out of that, I want to control my own destiny. I want to control my own who I am, what I do, what I create, everything. I want to have complete control over that, and I want to have the right people around me. In order to have the right people around me, I have to be able to attract the right type of people, and in order to do that, I have to be a good leader. And that book talked about how leadership is on a scale of 1 to 10. If you're a 1, you really can't lead anybody. If you're a 5, you can lead everybody below that. But if you want to be able to lead anybody, you have to be at a 10 for leadership. And I learned a lot about that, and it helped me, but I still struggled a little bit with leadership. And then I read this book called Strength-Based Leadership, Understanding People's Strengths. And that added to my leadership capabilities. I got a little bit better. And there was a couple other books I read. This was another one called Entree Leader by Dave Ramsey. He had some really good ideas about actually running a business and how you get people involved. And you don't want to have corporate spirit. You want to have team spirit in your business. Very good book. But then there was a book that really started to open up my eyes, and I don't have the book here right now. I've actually borrowed it to a friend, but this was a CD set that came. This is Tony Robbins, Creating Lasting Change. That is where I got a big cog in what I do. I started to understand the human psyche then, and how to influence them for their reasons, not mine. And what a change that was. Before that, I could always get probably 20 to 30% buy-in from people. And it was frustrating because 70 to 80% of the people, you just wouldn't get engaged. They do the work, but they really weren't passionate about it, and they wouldn't get engaged. And it really limits what you can achieve when only 30% of your people are really driving hard. And that book taught me how to understand the human psyche and how to do it for their reasons instead of my reasons. It helped in sales, it helped in everything. And that changed a lot for me. And then, probably the second best book I ever read, I'll give you the first one. And maybe, I don't think this will be a lot of surprise for a lot of people, but this is the Bible. There's no better book than this one right here. Even if you're not Christian, I would highly recommend reading the Bible. And the thing that people often struggle with the Bible is that people tell them what they think they should get out of it. And you have to experience it yourself. That was the thing that I learned with the Bible is those stories would mean something to me different than it would mean to you or anybody else. And that's the way it's meant to be in my mind. When you read the Bible, the stories are supposed to talk to you and let you grow. So that was what I learned about that. But this book right here, after I started reading the Bible, I'll tell you the story about that here in a moment. But this Think and Grow Rich, this is the best book I've ever read. Well, next to the Bible, of course, but very good book. Tony Robbins was excellent. I learned a lot about human psyche and how to influence people, but this taught me that I am totally resourced for anything. And it gave me a confidence, and I learned a lot about that. I actually read this book before I really started getting into the Bible, and the reason that is because I was always a struggle with the Bible. It was hard for me to understand what they were talking about. And I started reading this book here. And this is, in my opinion, God's law talking about in this book. It's universal law is what they talk about. But universal law is is energy. Everything is created with energy. So energy, if we're interconnects the whole universe. And in the Bible, it talks about we are totally resourced. We have dominion over everything. We are God's children. And God works his magic, in my opinion, through us. And that's how it's done. It's through energy. Since we're interconnected with all energy everywhere in the universe, that's how we do have dominion over everything. And this book taught me how to understand that. And to me, it's the rule book to how to be able to use the fact that I am God's child and I have dominion and I am totally resourced through God, how to use that to my advantage, to take advantage of what God has given us in life so we can accept and we can achieve what we were meant for. You know, Jim Rohn talks about the two greatest days in your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why. This one helped me do that. Now, what I am excited about right now is I'm putting a program together with this book. And I am going to not only offer this book, but I'm also going to offer the 15 things that successful people do. I'll also, you know, when you read these books, I read this book and it was okay, you know, it was a great book, but I still wasn't able to grasp all of the concepts of it, because it is kind of tough to grasp the concepts. And I had always read, I've read well over 100 books. Part of the problem with enjoying learning, expansion mentality, is that we learn and we learn and we learn and we learn and we don't take the time to apply or really understand what it was. There was 2 books that I did that on. Well, 3 really. The Bible, Tony Robbins. I spent 2 years studying that. And this one, I continue to study this one, but 2 years studying this one. So that's why I want to put this program together, because the first time I read it, there was some cool stuff in there, but I really didn't understand it well enough yet. So I started reading it over and over and over again. And then I started making notes on each chapter, so I could go back to those notes and revisit what was important to me. And I've studied Napoleon Hill, the author of this book, and what he did. He studied 500 of the top investors ever for 25 years. I mean, top producers ever, millionaires and billionaires, for 25 years to study exactly what they did. And this book talks about precisely what each and every one of them does. It's not rocket science. It's just understanding how the rules of the universe work and just filling your part of that. So what I want to do with this offer to people is what I'm putting together. It's going to be, I'm eventually going to sell it for about $1,200 a person, because there's a lot of it. It's the book, it's the interview, 2-hour interview with Napoleon Hill, the 15 successful activities of the most successful people, and all of my notes of 2 years of studying this book. But what I want to do is I'm going to offer it to people on the first time out. I'm just going to do it at $97 because I want to get good feedback from people and have them understand. So you can look for that offer. But this is like I said, this is a really great book. And I'm going to take some of my other books and do the same thing and create the notes on them. But that's what I've created with this one already. So, but after I read this and I started doing that, the major difference in my life came when I talked to a friend of mine, actually Jesse Smith, and he studied the Bible quite a bit. And I said, you know, I don't really enjoy studying or reading the Bible because I have a tough time understanding it. And he said, you know, I used to have that same issue. And what I did was actually pray to God to help me. And after that, all of a sudden, the words seemed to jump off the page at me, and I started to understand it. And if you understand universal law, it's the law of attraction. our subconscious, I'll get into some of that with my notes, but our subconscious is attached to universal law, God's law, and it connects us with the whole universe. And when we're emotionally charged by something, that's when our subconscious mind is in full gear, and it attracts whatever we are emotionally charged by to us. And I got that story from Jesse, and that charged me emotionally, but I didn't have really a good Bible to read from. And wouldn't you know, my birthday was about 7 days later, and I had all this excitement about what I had learned. And I got a book from my sister and my mother, the Learning Bible, and I didn't ask for it. And it's amazing that it came, and that was universal law, and that's what I learned to help me from this book. And there's so many things that have come to me in my life now, but you have to have the willingness to accept it when it comes to you. First of all, you got to recognize it. And that's what all my notes are going to be in this book. So I look forward. I'm going to be putting that offer out on my Facebook page, Inspired Motivated Leadership, and check it out. And I hope this finds you well. Have a super fantastic evening, and we will talk tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. Have a good evening.